Jaya Radha Madhava Kundra Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kundra Bihari Jaya Gopi Channavalabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Channavalabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Shri Giraj Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 7, Text 18. Do we have sheets? Should I wait for sheets? Okay. Advaryunata Havisha Yajamano Vishampate Diya Vishudaya Dadyo Tata Pradura Buddhari. Good, everyone? Text 18, 7:18. Advaryunata Havisha Yajamano Vishampate Diya Vishudaya Dadyo Tata Pradura Buddhari Advaryunata Havisha Yajamano Vishampate Diya Vishudaya Dadyo Tata Pradura Buddhari. Vaishnavis? Advaita Havisha Ya Vishudaya Vando Advaryunata Havisha Yajamano Vishampate Diya Vishuddhaya Dadyo Tata Prandura Buddhari Advyar Ad, Advaryuna Vidyajur Veda Ata taking Havisha with clarified butter Yajamana King Daksha Vishampate O Vidura Diya in meditation Vishuddhaya sanctified Dhadyo offered Tata immediately Pradu manifest Adbhut became Harir Hari the Lord. Translation. The great sage Maitreya said to Vidura, "My dear Vidura, as soon as King Daksha offered the clarified butter with Yajur Veda mantras in the sanctified meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayan." We can repeat. The great sage Maitreya said to Vidura, "My dear Vidura, as soon as King Daksha offered the clarified butter with Yajur Veda mantras in sanctified meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayan." Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Lord Vishnu is all-pervading. Any devotee who, in sanctified meditation, following the regulative principles, chants the required mantras in service and in a devotional mood, can see Vishnu. It is said in the Brahma Samhita that a devotee whose eyes are anointed with the ointment of love of Godhead can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead always within his heart. Lord Shyamasundar is so kind to his devotee. Advaryunata havisha yajamano vishampate diya vishuddhaya dadyo tata pradura buddhari. The great sage Maitreya said to Vidura, "My dear Vidura, as soon as King Daksha offered the clarified butter with Yajur Veda mantras in sanctified meditation, Lord Vishnu appeared there in his original form as Narayan." Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimad Kadambakanana Swami Iti Namine. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Gurudas Shadvaita Swami Iti Namine. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschata Deshatarine. Hare Krishna. Everyone I see has been coming for the morning class for a while, so I guess everyone is clued up with where we are in this chapter with Daksha. We've been hearing about him for a while, for a few months now. It's interesting. This specific verse is really interesting because you get this moment after all these months of like, this bad thing that Daksha did, and all the repercussions of it. Here he is, offering oblations into the fire, and boom, Vishnu appears. How's that for a yagya? Swaha, and then suddenly there he is, Narayan, on the shoulder of Garuda. It's pretty amazing, it's interesting because sometimes it's so easy to be an atheist. We believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but then when you find like something miraculous happens, you're like, oh, wow, he really exists. So here Daksha he's at this yagya, he's doing the sacrifice after many detours along the way, and Krishna is so purchased by his mood of submission and humility that he physically appears on the shoulders of Garuda. So this is a moment of hope. Hope that besides the shortcomings, when you put them aside, despite the shortcomings, despite the amount of flaws we have in our devotional service, despite every part of our character that is misaligned to Krishna, that still the Lord is so kind, like the last word says, Lord Shyamasundar is so kind to his devotee. Still the Lord is so kind that he won't let us rest in our inadequacies. He won't let us cuddle up. He will ensure that we will progress. And how will that assurance come? Prabhupada is saying in the Prabhupada, Lord Shyamasundar is so kind to his devotee. How was Lord Shyamasundar kind to Daksha? How was Lord Shyamasundar kind to Daksha? Sliced off his head and gave him the head of a goat? Yes, by appearing before him. That's true. But in order for that appearance to be there, his head was sliced off. And he got the head of a goat. And is this the kindness of Lord Shyamasundar? We'll get back to that point. But, you look at the story of Daksha and this moment of hope, and how it gives us this opportunity to rise to the platform of purity. But then we look for a moment, if we glance back at Daksha's bewildered intelligence. How Vishnu says in the verses to come up, Daksha is going to glorify Vishnu and Vishnu will respond. Lord Narayan will respond. And in one of those verses he says, the man of average intelligence understands that Brahma, Shiva and I are all working in cohesion. And so that's like a very nice way of saying, Daksha, you have less than average intelligence because you couldn't figure this out. So there's Daksha, with his bewildered intelligence and God himself appearing to you to tell you you've been a fool. And was Daksha an idiot? No. He was a Prajapati. He had intelligence. He had supreme intelligence. But with that intelligence, he was justified in his critical mentality. And this is the difference. We may have so much of knowledge. We may have so much of knowledge about what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing to do. And it's so easy to justify our opinion with the Shastra, to use the Shastra in order to justify our means. So if we do this, if we use the Shastra to justify our means, then we can use it to justify one action, and you can use it to justify another action. Both. You can use it to justify both actions. And therefore a man such as Daksha, he would have had to, from the point that Sati got married, to the point of her coming and seeing him, to the point of her being burnt in fire, to the point of Shiva appearing, all this time, he could not see through his intelligence to say, hey, I'm making a big mistake here. He could not see through it because he was justified in his critical mentality. I'm right. Of course I'm right. I'm sure Daksha would have been able to quote 50 verses, as he did, in the other chapters, to say why he was right. So therefore, it's this justification. It's the fact that we're able to convince ourselves that we are fine in our Maya. This is the part that gets us. Now, I was thinking about it because recently I was having an argument with my mom. And she said, this is just your ego. And it hurt so much. I was like, how could you say that? Really, how? It was maybe not those words. And then I went to Rasastali and I was like, but this and this happened. You think it's my ego? She said, yes. And I was like, oh God. In that moment, my heart just completely deflated. And I was just like, and it was like not an important thing that we were arguing about. But what I saw in that moment was just how much we can become convinced that on the right basis we're acting. And how much we can convince ourselves with all the logic in the world that actually I have a right to perform this action. And how important it is that we're able to go in front of Krishna and say, despite the fact that I feel I'm right, Krishna's devotee, is this right? What do you think? What is your opinion? And because it's impossible to see out of ourselves when we're fixed in the mentality. And so therefore we have to allow another's vision to guide us. And often it's not going to happen with that person. I couldn't take it when my mother said it. But I could take it when Rasastali said it. Because it was coming from outside the situation. So this point is that we can't trust our intelligence. And we can't trust our justification that I have a right to do this. We have to always submit ourselves to another person and say, what do you think? So that was one short point. But we're coming back to Daksha. And I was listening to a lecture by Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj. It was an older lecture, much older. His voice sounded so different. So it must have been quite some years ago. And in this lecture, he was saying that the jiva makes mistakes. But not just that the jiva makes mistakes, or that the jiva is prone to make mistakes. It's just that the jiva will make mistakes. It's not like, will you mess up? It's going to be, you're going to mess up. Accept it. Now, there's going to be a point where you mess up sometimes. You're saying, so he was like really emphasizing this point that it's not maybe it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There'll be a time for something that you mess up. Maybe there'll be many times in a day that you mess up, because the jiva is prone to commit mistakes. It will happen. And he said, you may get publicly chastised for them. And the important part of what we see with Daksha is how he receives the correction. Suddenly, with the head of a goat, he is able to think better than he did with a human being, as a human being. And that's the interesting part. When we were in Vrindavan once, they were studying this Shastra, and every day I would be scared that I would get up in the mirror and see a head of a goat. Every day I was just like, oh my God, one day this is going to happen. It's going to be a head of a goat. Jai Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai. And I was thinking the other day that, sometimes it feels that humility is painful. It's like painful. And I was considering that actually I'm very scared of being humbled. I know humility is the first item of education, It's the first item of knowledge. And I know that being humble will bring me closer to Krishna, but I'm afraid of it. Can anybody relate to this? It's like afraid of being humbled because it's going to feel painful. Am I the only one? Nobody else? Yeah. Because and the reason why it's painful is because you know what's dying? What's dying is our ego. It's so painful because our ego's dying. And Pranada Prabhu, she was mentioning how we have to die 1,000,000 deaths before dying. Because every time, all the other deaths is our ego that's just dying a little before the actual time comes when we can detach from our subtle body. And so, the question comes up in that, here's the feeling that I'm going to be hurt if I'm humbled, But when you consider Daksha and the fact that he has his head of the goat, you consider which head was better. Was it better to keep his human head, or was it better to have the head of a goat? Which was his ramifications for being very critical to Lord Shiva, that his head was cut off, It was better that he had the head of the goat, because that head bowed down to Vishnu. That head, he could have prayers emerging in his mind that he could offer with sincerity. That head cried tears for the daughter that he let commit suicide. He let her. Without flinching, he let her do it. So what use was his human head? Because with his human head, he could not feel any compassion. But with this head of a goat, he could. So whenever I'm thinking, to be humble is going to be painful, I'm thinking also, better a head of a goat, Rukmini. Better a head of a goat. Better be humbled. Better swallow the pill, And because then we can come before Krishna. And then Krishna may choose to appear before us. So, because then we can be in the right consciousness to receive mercy. That's the thing, right? We go in front of Radha Radhanath, my Lord, please be merciful. But it takes only a moment to realize that there's mercy everywhere in this temple. There's mercy when you stand in front of the altar and are able to look at the Lord, the mere fact that you can. There's mercy that when you're exiting, there's a charanamrita and you put a drop on your hand. There's mercy when you see the tilak of a devotee. There's mercy at every corner. The problem is not the flow of mercy. Since Lord Chaitanya came, there was no issues with the flow of mercy. The mercy is flowing. The problem is our consciousness of being able to receive it. Can we receive the mercy that Krishna is offering our way? Or do we let it slide by? One story that Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj was telling in this lecture was that he said that Srila Prabhupada was sitting in a class of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Maybe he mentioned it again in recent months because he's been giving class, I'm not sure. And as he was sitting in the class, an old man next to him couldn't hear something or was unsure about something that Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said. So he asked Prabhupada, he inquired about it. And Prabhupada tried to answer his question. And Bhakti Siddhanta saw this. And he stopped him and he said, so you think you're more qualified to speak than me? Crushing, right? Public humiliation. Public humiliation. And here's the thing. Oftentimes you will feel ridiculed or criticized for something that you didn't do. Now, I'm not saying that don't stand up for yourself or don't correct the situation or don't say truthfully, actually the situation is like this. But specifically when it comes to the spiritual master or someone who you are very much convinced is your well-wisher. Someone you're very much convinced that this person is my well-wisher, this person actually wants the best for me. When that happens, it's what I often like to think when that happens, is that for all the things that I got away with, that I thought I got away with. This is the personified reaction. Because I'd be like, but I didn't do that, Guru Maharaj. That wasn't my fault. No. For all the things I got away with when he wasn't looking, of course he was looking, when I thought he wasn't looking, that is my personified reaction. And that's the way Srila Prabhupada took it. He didn't tell Bhaktisiddhanta, sorry Maharaj, like he just inquired. He's an old man, so he can't hear you. No. And often when Prabhupada would reflect on the story, he would reflect and say, and laugh, enjoying the fact that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur chastised him. Now, this is not an excuse for abuse, but it is true that on the devotional path from someone who we're convinced is our well-wisher, we should be able to take correction. Because if we're not able to take correction, then we may not even be fortunate enough to have the head of a goat. The other options with the daksha would have gone to hell for a long, long time. So there's one more point that I wanted to make with regards to this verse. Because we see that when Daksha gets this head of the goat, he then moves forward to do the sacrifice. But nobody questioned and said, Daksha, now you're hardly a human being. How can you be doing a Vedic sacrifice? Nobody said, he's fallen. He doesn't belong here. So note that even on the levels of the demigods, they were understanding that you cannot persecute a person for their previous actions if they're trying to be rectified. You cannot hold it in your heart and say, how could they have done that 10 years later? And it's important because we have to sit and look at our hearts and see what we're holding. So when somebody tries to come to the platform of, what is that verse? 930 Apichet Suduracharu. God is here somewhere. Oh, I lost it. Lost the translation. But basically, Krishna is saying that for someone who falls from the platform of bhakti, if they are connected back into the stream of devotional service, they are properly situated. And therefore, that person should never be considered fallen. And so therefore, people don't turn their back against Daksha and say Daksha how many years now has it passed? Since this happened? Thousands, and for thousands of years, Daksha is being held as this example of the critical mentality, But in that immediate moment, it did not hamper the way people saw him. Because in that moment of accepting humility, Krishna saw it fit to be in his presence. And when Krishna is accepting a devotee, who are we to reject them? Thank you. When Krishna is accepting a devotee, who are we to reject them? Now, I have to say that also goes for ourselves. And it's also true that we can do that with the proper humility. When we find ourselves that we are straying away from the path of devotion, we can do it 1,000,000 times a day. But the fact that we choose to then put ourselves back in the flow of devotion means that we are attempting. And therefore there should be some kindness. Some kindness that if Krishna is accepting me, and I should too understand that every soul every jiva is going to commit a mistake. The verses itself, apichet suduracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadur eva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisa. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. He quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. So, these famous verses of Bhagavad Gita. But it's there to instruct us that when we see that someone is in error, also understand that they too are jivas. And when they try the next day, the next moment to still be there, still serving, still engaging, still chanting Hare Krishna, then maybe also we should understand that Krishna allows the person to be, and so should we. Because Daksha was allowed to do the sacrifice. And in doing the sacrifice, Vishnu appears. Now, in this purport, we can see Prabhupada is giving us the requirements in Daksha's mentality, the requirements that brought him to the point where Vishnu appeared. And it says here, Prabhupada is saying, any devotee in sanctified meditation, following the regulative principles, chants the required mantras in service, and in a devotional mood can see Vishnu. So if you break that down, sanctified mentality, following the regulative principles, chanting the required mantras in service and in a devotional mood. This was the requirements of Daksha's mentality that he was able to see Narayan. And what does this mean, a sanctified mentality? It means that now his mind was purged of that envy, purged of the negativity. And so therefore he could offer his mind to Krishna. Following the regulative principles, that he was now being subservient to Shastra in its truth, not Shastra as we wanted to see it, And following the regulative principles means that his actions were now aligned. His actions were aligned with what Krishna wanted, And then chanting the required mantras, his words were now aligned. What mantras was Daksha chanted prior but empty mantras? When he was trying to do the sacrifice before with its critical mentality, those mantras were empty mantras. Or as Sachinandan Swami likes to say, broken mantras. But let our mantras not be broken. Let our mantras be invested with the sanctity of mind, the purity of mind, the sanctity of action. Our japa time is not just when we pick up the bead bag. Our japa time is the sum and substance of all our actions and interactions with everybody and everything that we have throughout the 24 hours. And so when it's so difficult to concentrate, no wonder that one's for me. And so here it is, Daksha is offering the sanctified mind. He's offering his mind. He's offering in agreement with the regulative principles, he's offering his actions. With sacred mantras, he's offering his words. And in a devotional mood, he's offering his heart. So when these things are aligned in our offering, when our mind, when our words, when our deeds, when our heart is all aligned in that offering, we can see Vishnu, we can see Krishna. And he won't just be marble anymore. To our vision and to our hearts. And it's interesting because Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj was also mentioning in some other lecture that when you look at Jnana Yoga, what is happening in Jnana Yoga is simply an engagement of the intelligence. And since it's yoga, it's trying to engage the intelligence to come closer to Krishna. What is happening in Karma Yoga, but that we are engaging our activities, our actions to come closer to Krishna. What is happening in Dhyana Yoga, but we're trying to engage our mind to come closer to Krishna. But what is happening in Bhakti? What is happening in Bhakti is not just engaging your heart, but it's now you're engaging your mind, your intelligence, your words, and your heart. All of it. And that's what makes Bhakti supreme. That's what makes Bhakti superior. Because you got no wiggle space. You got no wiggle space. Everything aligned with Krishna. And when we're misaligned, Lord Shamachandra will be kind to us. And when we're aligned, He's kind to us. And it takes this maturity to be able to see the kindness. But sometimes it's not at the moment. Sometimes it's hard to see it in the moment. If you're really lucky, if you're really deeply advanced, you can see it in the moment. But even if you don't see it in the moment, and you're caught by your ego like me, then at least in the next moment, try and see it. Let it not be years. Let it not be your daughter dying of suicide before you bow your ego. And so we're learning from Daksha. We're learning from Daksha and his story, and we're learning from his actions, what it means to see Krishna's kindness and the different forms and shapes that it comes in, and accept it as kindness. Accept it as Krishna's kindness, because it is his kindness. Shiva is saying, in this few verses before, he's saying, that what would be the correctional activities for all the different people who were aiding in that sacrifice. Someone loses their teeth and they can only eat pakora batter. Like literally it says chickpea flour dough. I'm like, that's pakora batter. You can only eat pakora batter for your whole life, Or he eats through the mouth of his disciples, And we're wondering, these are like intense corrections, for a long time. But therefore, when this is happening, you think, wow. But then you see Shiva's mentality. That Shiva is not doing it because I want you to suffer because you did this to me. Shiva's doing it because he's giving them an opportunity to progress, an opportunity to correct their mentality and come back to the proper platform. So here we are with Daksha, and we're able to, and just in summary, the points that I feel like I would like to take away from this verse is that do not be righteous about your critical mentality. Have a voice that can tell you when your ego is coming in the way. Because if devotees don't feel like they can tell you, they won't. They may tell other people, which is also not good, but they won't tell you. So that's the first thing from Daksha. The other point of that, know that we're going to make a mistake. And that when the mistake comes, it doesn't really help to just beat yourself over about it, but it helps to correct the mentality and allow humility to transform our consciousness. It's better to have a head of a goat than to deal with the poison of pride. Because that poison is so steeped. And then what to do? What to do when you feel it rise in your consciousness on a daily basis? What can we do but say, my dear Radharani, here, I can see it, you can see it. And I place it in front of you. Do with it what you will. I know it's not true, this chatter that's going on in my head. I know it's not true, but I place it in front of you because what else can I do? What else can I do? And hopefully then, we won't get beheaded, Hopefully we wouldn't have to be as severe as the head of a goat. Prashanta Prabhu, she once said, especially in Vrindavan, because you know how Vrindavan is. It's so sweet, it's so nice, and it's so spicy at the same time. And she said that Srimati Radharani, she will show you the mirror. And what you see in the mirror will be the contents of your own heart. But if you don't heed that mirror, and you don't try to be in the corrective, you don't show willingness to correct, then she takes that same mirror and she turns it to the world. Then the world sees. And that's what happened to Daksha. I'm sure there were things in his head that were saying, this needs to change. Maybe he got he didn't. And Brahma and all the demigods, they couldn't correct him. They knew that this was going on, but they couldn't correct him because he wasn't open to correction. He wasn't open to correction. And so then what happens? The whole world could see the mirror. The whole world could see the mirror. So We can be humbled kindly if we're willing to look at ourselves on a daily basis. And it's therefore important, this introspection. It's important, but it's introspection through the eyes of the Shastra. We don't need to go into our heart and uproot every anartha with some magical tweezer. We can't. And Krishna it's through the process of devotional service that all the anarthas are removed from the heart. We actually can't do it ourselves. But we can say, yes, Krishna, I accept this process of you cleaning my heart. I'll stop resisting it. Or at least I'll try to stop resisting it. Because if there's less resistance, then it's less painful. Because it's like having a patient and you want to do heart surgery and there's no anesthetic. And they're freaking out all over the place. But if we let Krishna's kindness be our anesthetic and allow him to perform the surgeries that he needs to, we can be spiritually healthy. So I was supposed to be summarizing and I added more points. So let our mind, actions, words, and heart be guided to the path of bhakti. And where we can't hear Krishna's voice, let us hear the voices of those who we feel connected enough to hear from. I'm going to leave it here. There's a few minutes left. If anybody has any thoughts or wants to add something or has a question. And, okay.
I'm just appreciating your class and some of the points that you brought out, if I may just also talk about them. I like the point that you make about Daksha realized that we are here for purification. And he made a mistake, he fell, and now the humility is there. We see children do that. When they're walking or they're running and they fall, they don't look at who's looking at me, what are people going to say. They just get up, dust themselves, and off they go. They don't even dust themselves. They just get up and off they go to wherever they're going to. They're focused on their destination, or they're focused on what the goal is. And this is what happens to us, unfortunately, where the ego is too great. We may be going on a path to a destination or to a goal, but when the ego is disturbed, then we veer off that path. And this is what we see what happened with Daksha. He veered off and he realized his mistake. And don't let our ego get the better of us. And then yes, we will get purified, but this is the important thing in Krishna consciousness, is that whatever service we do should be done in the association of devotees. Because in the service we will be making mistakes. Like you say, it's not negotiable. The mistakes will happen. But when we make the mistakes and we continue making those mistakes for the rest of our life, who's going to correct us? And that is why devotional service has to be done in the association. But what type of association? It has to be higher association, not the same. Because the other person could be making the same mistake and could be learning the same mistake from you as well. But higher association is necessary, and this is where a mentorship program in cultivating devotees is absolutely necessary. And this is what we see with Daksha, is that Lord Shiva is on a higher level. And therefore that purification took place. Because if Shiva was not on a higher level, then the mistake would go on and everyone would just have a big laugh and there would be humiliation and all sorts of things without any rectification, without any purification. So that association is so important. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Charu.
Hare Krishna.
Paul. Is it on?
Okay. Okay, so like
They
this.
won't hear you online. Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
My question is on humility. Ne? So I work, and I find it difficult to, and it's just mainly based on. Okay. It's mainly based on what Mahaprabhu in Soweto likes to say, that when you're in the association of devotees, you have to be as humble as a lamb, but then with non-devotees, be as ferocious. I think it's something he quoted from Prabhupada. I find it very difficult to somehow, because with non-devotees, humility for them means weakness and taking advantage of that. So now how do you balance that? I don't know if I'm making sense.
It's not easy. A few thoughts come to my mind. It's be a lamb at home and a lion in the chase. Prabhupada would say it about his female book distributors. So, often when this question is asked, the response that comes is, remember there's the idea of a snake. He can raise his hood, but he doesn't need to bite. So when you're having to deal in an external platform where it's not necessarily devotees, and you have to assert yourself, there's ways to raise your hood so that your boundaries are in place, that you're not being taken advantage of. It's if you're being taken advantage of in that sort of work situation, then humility is not going to help there. But there's also a way that does it, that you do it, that you can state your boundaries and where somebody can, but you can do it kindly. And I've seen that, advanced devotees are able to state where their boundaries are. Like, okay, you cannot treat me like this. And, I'm taking a habit that this was due on this point, it was meant to be done. You had a certain requirement to do it. It's not humble if I say, oh, it's okay. You still keep to principles. But if there's someone is crossing your boundaries and it's affecting you, like it may do in a work situation, then you have to be able to state it and state it kindly. Being humble doesn't mean I agree with everything you say. Being humble doesn't mean I have to accept everything you say. Humility is the condition of the heart. It means that in this point, it is not out of ego that I am acting. That's what humility means. It's not the exact words. It's not that I'm saying, sorry, Prabhu, I'm lower than the worm in stool. It's not the words. It's in that moment, is my ego acting? Can it be acting at the workplace? Yes. It doesn't just reserve itself for devotional settings. So even then, we should be questioning. At this point, am I acting out of ego? Because even if the person is a non-devotee, Krishna will still use that example to smash you. He will still use it. So that's the internal question. So my option would be act with the right motivation. If you're not sure, tell somebody, do you think this is the proper motivation? Question yourself, is this my only motivation? And then state your boundaries if the person needs it because you're in a workplace, but do it kindly. And see, what is it? In the Bhagavad Gita, there's that verse that Krishna says, if you hear me, I will direct you. This is paraphrasing. But if you act not hearing me, you will be lost. It's one of the last verses in the 18th chapter. Yeah, it's one of the last verses in the 18th chapter. If you act not hearing me, you will be lost. And that's the problem when we turn down the volume of the super soul. And we're like, nah, I'm going to do what I want to do. And when you turn down that volume and you're not hearing Krishna, Krishna will say when your ego is coming up even with someone who's a non-devotee. I don't know if that's, yeah. And just in response to your point, Arjuna Prabhu, I like the analogy about the child and how the child gets up, doesn't think about it. But I was thinking that two things happen, when there is somebody slips up. And it can be major slip-ups or minor slip-ups. Two things happen. One is they get up and start walking, but they're pretending like it never happened. And that doesn't aid the devotee. Because when you pretend like it not happened, you're not realizing your laces are untied. And all that's going to happen is you're going to trip and fall again. And no, it didn't happen. So I trip and fall again, and I trip and fall again. The other one who sits there says, I fell. There's no hope now. It's all over. I cannot reach that goal because I fell. Which doesn't help you either. It's also ego. This is the interesting thing. Both reactions are ego-based. The first one is ego. I couldn't have fell. You didn't see that. That didn't happen. The second one is, no, the ego is so big that I'm so fallen that you cannot save me, Krishna. My fallenness is greater than your mercy. That is ego. Yes. So therefore, when we slip up, get up, acknowledge what's happened, and start walking. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Okay, thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. It's fine, it's perfectly in time.
Like trying to get so many. Sorry.